Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the Golden Stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now here's Brian.
Oh yes, the Golden Stallion here for you. We got a special. This is a special of specials. And I need to thank, first of all, I need to thank Jason King of Sean's Outpost and, of course, the inimitable MK Lords for giving me the opportunity to speak at Coins in the Kingdom. And that's exactly what this is. This is my talk from Coins in the Kingdom 2014. It was a fantastic time. I was unfortunately myself and the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, the Duchess of Debauchery. We were only there for a little over 24 hours, and then we had to go off to Inside Bitcoins, which also wasn't as bad as you might expect. But I'll be doing Stephanie and I will be doing a special talking about, doing a conference wrap up in the future. But right now I want to get out to you this talk because, again, really, I appreciate Jason and MK. They scheduled me. They gave me a good hour and actually ended up with questions going a little bit over an hour. There was a great audience there, and they had a lot of questions. Including you'll hear from Andreas Antonopoulos. He's the first person to bring up a point. And it was a fantastic time. So, and being able to give this talk was really great. Stephanie also gave a talk, and I will be releasing that as a Sovryn Tech special in the future too, because it is really important about, how Bitcoin can really set you free business-wise, and about taking that great leap into going fully into self-employment, entrepreneurship, and really the ways that Bitcoin totally empowers that, and it does. But for right now, here we have this talk, and this talk is the dangers of reputation and trustless systems. And I mean, I had a lot of material to cover, had it very much written out. So if there's points where it sounds like I'm reading, yes, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm reading off of my phone on it. And I want to make a few points, though. This is going to be kind of a special intro here to it, and we'll get right into it. And I will also speak at the end of it. I will do an outro on this episode, so do listen all the way through. I want to make the point that through this talk, there was three main companies that really came to mind, and it's about Bitcoin 2.0. That's the whole point about this, is Bitcoin 2.0. And I talked about BitNation, which listeners of the show know how I feel about BitNation. I talked about Ethereum, which listeners of the show also know how I feel about Ethereum. And I talked about BitShares. BitShares was often my example case when discussing how these things how they would work out. Now, I want to make it very clear, though, and I tried to in the talk itself, where I tried to say, look, Dan Larimer is a genius. I love this guy. Okay. And Andreas actually gave him props at the end too, for some insights. And so this is the point I want to make really clear first off, is that I have a different vision. I have a different desire for my path to freedom than, say, Bitcoin 2.0 technologies do. Okay. If I had to choose, if there was that, horrible, or not horrible, if there was that choice where I had to choose somehow, a Bitcoin 2.0 tech, not counting NXT, I'd be on board with BitShares, because you know what? I think Dan Larimer is a very caring human being. He cares about, people's freedom. This guy is the real deal. He is not just in this for the money. If he's in it for that at all, I mean, he is just a genuine, liberty loving person. And I have tons of respect for him, and I have tons of respect for the members of his team, people who I know very well, and some of which actually listen to this show. So, and just last week, in the very last episode, I mentioned how I think BitShares has an incredible infrastructure going for it. I was very complimentary towards it. So I just want to be super clear, okay, that because I'm mentioning BitShares here, I don't mean to be insulting. It's just the only thing is, and this is a credit to Dan Larimer, he's the only guy with the guts to say what his plans are and how he's going to make this work. Or maybe it's not even a matter of guts. He's the only guy that actually has the intellect to tell you how he's going to do everything. So the fact that that BitShares ends up being a common example in this talk is actually a credit to BitShares. I see a different future. Okay, I want things going in a different direction than perhaps what they do, at BitShares. Okay, but total credit to them that I could even talk about because other guys, if I talk about BitNation, they don't have as far as I don't know how they plan on doing the things they're talking about doing. You have Ethereum. What's their proof? Proof of stake? I don't know. And I make a little jab at a delegated proof of stake in it because it's not working out, according to plan so far. But I've said countless times on the show that I am very intrigued by delegated proof of stake, and it might be one of the better proofs out there, next to maybe proof of resource or something. So anyway, that I want to get that out there. I want to make sure that's very, very clear that I have no beef with the BitShares team or with Dan Larimer whatsoever. As to where with other people, yeah, I don't know. There's guys involved with Ethereum I absolutely love. I don't know much about anything with BitNation other than the possibility that certain unsavory characters could be involved with it. Full disclosure there, I've talked about it on this show before. So, all right. So now I've got that out there, and we'll get into the talk in just a minute. But anyway, I want to say it was a great time. It was an absolute honor to speak at this. Got a lot of people afterwards even saying, hey, do you want to go out to dinner? We need to talk more about this sort of thing. So I'm glad that it seemed people took it seriously, even though when you listen to this, maybe you'll think some of these thoughts go to an extreme. And I admit that it's going to an extreme, but I want to explore those ideas because everyone else, I feel like everybody, honestly, not that this whole conversation was a bit, not that this whole talk that I gave was a ripping fest. Okay. But I think most people are genuinely afraid to tick off these, whatever coin company, or, whatever technology, they're afraid. And, I want to have clarity, but I'm not afraid to say, whatever's on my mind at all. And no one else is willing to say this stuff. There's people willing to write off, just offhand anything that isn't Bitcoin. They don't mind doing that and making death threats of people, that are trying to do anything outside of Bitcoin. Certainly there's those, but there's people who aren't willing to really discuss where could this shit go. And so I felt it important to do it. And maybe you'll think I'm wrong. And that's okay. We can disagree. And again, I am telling you, I have a different vision for where I want things to go compared to what I feel a lot of Bitcoin 2.0 technologies want to head to. I do not talk about really NXT. It gets a mention in here. I do not talk about NXT during this. NXT is really, I feel like NXT is actual grassroots, and that if people don't want it to go a certain direction, they won't let it go that certain direction, because NXT is not getting, again, they're doing a lot of this stuff that these other Bitcoin 2.0 companies are just theorizing about. They're already implementing it, but it's all getting done with very little in the way of any kind of venture capital or of any kind of funding. They sure as hell aren't getting $15 million like Ethereum does. So, they don't really, it doesn't cross my radar as far as, being a concern, because I don't, in fact, that's part of the problem is I don't know a lot of people excited about it. There's definitely, a community behind it, but I don't know, any big names per se, that are really intrigued by it. And it still to this day blows my mind. But anyway, so you don't really hear much about NXT in this. And there's other Bitcoin 2.0 technologies out there. There's Cora. There's a whole slew of them. But I pretty much stick to, as far as raising, the multitude of concerns, I pretty much stick to BitNation and Ethereum. And like I said, BitShares is mentioned in this in large part just because Dan Larimer's the only guy that actually knows how he's going to do this stuff. He's the only guy that has a clue. I'm not, in no way, not saying these are bad people by no stretch. And I make sure I mention that in the talk. But anyway, that's enough of me. Or no, wait. that's not enough of me because we're going to go back to me. Okay, let's go to me. And at Coins in the Kingdom 2014. Here we go. And I'll be back with more right after the talk. A little bit of a late start, but thank you very much for waiting. I'm going to be running off my phone here a little bit. But what this talk is titled as is the dangers of reputation and trustless systems. Now, this is more a philosophical talk, just to get that right out of the gate, but let me go ahead and start right off. I'm a person that likes to brood. Everybody knows what brooding is, right? Okay. It's unfortunately a pejorative term. I've brooded all my life. I've actually, one time I was going into court and my lawyer specifically said, Brian, look, if you're going in there, please, just don't look like you're brooding. Don't brood. It's that bad. But brooding, all it really is deep thinking, and I do like to think very deeply. And my point in telling you this is that I want you to know that what I'm about to talk about, I have thought about quite a bit. So, and again, I don't want this to be a really technical talk. When you've been involved, like myself, in the cypherpunk community for quite some time, you can often speak at an experience level that isn't good for communicating a broader message. And I don't want that to be the case. So to get this off on the right foot, I think we should start it off with everybody's favorite subject, which is history, right? Everybody loves history, maybe. This is good history. This isn't like in school.
Yay.
Yeah. So it is the year 180 CE, or AD if you're that persuasion. And the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius was just finishing his campaign against the Germanic tribes of the north. This might sound like a movie, but that movie was very much based on fact. Marcus was able, this emperor, Marcus Aurelius, he was able to bring the empire to incredible heights, not just as far as size, though certainly that was the point of fighting the Germanic wars, but also in philosophy, in economic matters. It was really a grand time. He was the last of what are called the five good emperors. And history records him well no matter what persuasion you happen to be. He was regarded a philosopher king. Some people in this room might have heard that phrase used in white papers. That's kind of weird. But he was a pretty wise fellow. He actually co-ruled with a young man named Lucius Verus. He really wanted some degree of decentralization of power. In fact, so much, this is an emperor, and you have to keep this in mind. This guy is controlling the largest landmass of its day, not the largest empire ever, but he was controlling the largest empire of his day, and he had the time, like me, to brood a lot. Now, of course, I don't get to brood because I have an empire, but he did. And in his brooding, he changed his mind from time to time. And some of the thoughts that he came up with, if you read his collection called The Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which I highly recommend, he, in his later on in life, particularly around the time of the war against the Germanic tribes, pretty much started thinking about what is the nature of power? What is the nature of control? What is the nature of autonomy? And who should wield it? Who should have ultimate control? And he actually came to the conclusion that it should be the individual. And it's not unheard of that he would think of this. It's not just lip service, because again, he was the first emperor to really co-rule and make sure that co-ruler had as much power as he did. He really had the ideas of decentralization. Of course, he couldn't know the word decentralization at all. That's impossible. But he seemed to have the concept down quite a bit. And this was about 2,000 years ago. Again, 180 CE. So at the end of his campaign, he had pretty much won, and his son, Commodus, who had every intention of expecting to be emperor himself, but unfortunately that wasn't in, and again, you can read into the history itself, this isn't just a film. Marcus Aurelius knew that he should not be emperor, because he had little life experience, little understanding of how the world worked. Even as hard as he tried, he was one of those guys, really was in the lap of luxury, liked to make things look good, but really didn't have the stuff when it counted. And so Commodus, at the end of the war, rides up to his father, famously, and says, "Father, have I missed the battle?" And Marcus Aurelius looks at his son
very sadly and says, no, you've missed the war. And I want you to understand something. I was in the U.S. military. I was in the U.S. Army for some time. I don't particularly care. That experience has taught me to not appreciate anything that has to do with violence or war. But I think that story has a pretty deep meaning, a much deeper meaning that needs some exploration. And that deeper meaning I want to apply to Bitcoin 2.0, which is what this is really all about. It's without question that the advent of Bitcoin and blockchain technology has changed so much in our world today, or at the very least, our perceptions of what is possible. And beyond Bitcoin, blockchains are going to change your life in the not so far future, I should say. But how exactly? Will it free you financially the way Bitcoin has freed so many entrepreneurs, merchants, as well as individuals, to have an incredibly resilient store of wealth, which Bitcoin is really good at? And let's be clear on this. Bitcoin showed that none of these systems of control, like regulation or banks, or you name the financial institution that needed to exist, quote unquote, individuals can do just fine managing their own finances now, thanks to Bitcoin. So how will Bitcoin 2.0 set you free? Will it be like 3D printing, where it set free the means of production? I want to explore that question of what exactly does Bitcoin 2.0 do? So these Bitcoin 2.0 companies, some of the more popular ones, that being Ethereum, BitNation, BitShares, NXT, even, this one might sound weird, but even IBM's Adept technology. How many people have heard of Adept here? Okay, we've got a few. Cool. Do any of you, I host a tech podcast, Sovryn Tech. Do any of you listen to that? Woo, right on, all right. Fantastic. So you might have heard of Adept from that. I've been talking about it for a little while. But Adept, just for those that don't know, this is kind of the strange hybrid between blockchain and BitTorrent technology. And it's all open source. All of these projects here are open source. That's important. I don't think anybody would have as much trust in them as they seem to if they weren't. Now, with startups, and that's really what these are, they're all startups, and they have that same startup culture. They do crowdfunding and all this business, try to get seeding and et cetera. Usually, any good startup begins with an idea. And it's an idea that answers a question. What problem does this solve? Okay, that's how you enter any market. And I think it's a good foundation to have that question. It really makes a difference between startups that don't last any longer than a year and ones that end up becoming decade-long global properties. But I think there's an inherent flaw in startups, and that is part of what I want to discuss here. While I love the foundational question of what problem does it solve, I think it's incredibly incomplete. It should be, what problem does it solve without creating a whole bunch of other problems? And for whatever reason, almost no startup that I'm aware of, and I'm very involved in the tech space, at least watching it, really considers the second part of that. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just greed. Maybe they just want to get out by Google or IBM or Apple or whoever. Or maybe it's that single-minded focus that it takes, I think, sometimes to create a really great product or service. And so that becomes the question then, what is it? Did Bitcoin 2.0 address these questions? Have these companies addressed these questions? Do they have a single-minded focus, perhaps? We hope it's not greed, right? We don't want it to be greed. We hope it's not because they end up wanting to get bought out by Facebook in the future. So let's suppose it's a single-minded focus. But do these companies have a single-minded focus? I would venture no, they don't. Because what is part of their billing? They want to be everything. They want to do everything for everyone. So that becomes the question. If they haven't, if they haven't considered what problems are they solving, because they don't have that single-minded focus, are they able to see the forest for the trees? Or in other words, did they miss the battle and miss the war? I wonder. So let's examine this. I want to start with a company that has the clear stated goal out of these Bitcoin 2.0 companies, and that would be BitNation. It's the most honest of the bunch. In fact, as I understand, there will be a blockchain wedding here tomorrow, I believe it is. So, and certainly I wish those two individuals the absolute best in happiness, no doubt about it. And happiness would seem to be a major part of BitNation's goal. They would like to create competition within the areas of governance. You might as well read that as government. They're really the same word at the end of the day. And they're going to do this by creating blockchains, and as I understand it, they'll use several blockchains for security and redundancy purposes. Not a terrible idea. They will somehow handle for you the fact that your marriage and divorce, it'll handle your marriage and divorce certificates and whatever else. It can help you set up healthcare services. It'll have an ID system, dispute resolution. This is why I need my phone. Incorporating land registry, birth and death certificates, child care contracts, health insurance, unemployment insurance, pensions, crisis negotiations, advocacy, that means lawyers, education, as well as peer-to-peer protection, individual security, and contract enforcement, as well as services that exist outside of the blockchain, though I have no idea what those are. And I'm sure they have kind of their own little, they say it's not a currency, but it's called XBN. Again, it's said not to be a currency, but rather a share in the BitNation company, and will end up being treated more or less as a store of value, just like any of these other kind of altcoin ideas or Bitcoin 2.0 ideas. And I don't think that's unfair. I agree with Dan Larimer when he says that a lot of the cryptocurrencies are better understood when you think of them as a share instead of as, something like the dollar of that type. So at the end of the day, they will also offer a currency in reality. That's, just they can use different words, but there it is. So with all that described, I have a little secret to tell you about. We mentioned quite a few different Bitcoin 2.0 technologies, and to keep myself from having to repeat that entire list again, here's the secret. Ethereum wants to do the same exact thing. Different words, but trust me, it all means the same stuff. And if anything, they want to do a whole lot more. So now Ethereum is a little more clever, like I said in their wording about it. They don't say they're providing government services per se. They use phraseology like, we want to be the TCP, which is the foundation of the internet as you know it. We want to be the TCP to your HTTP or SMTP ideas. And HTTP being websites, and SMTP being email. That's what you create, and Ethereum gives you the foundation to do that sort of thing. So they don't necessarily say governance, but at the end of the day, I think as we talk about this more, you'll see that it's probably just about the same things. And again, that list I gave you before from BitNation came directly from their website, and this list for Ethereum, real quick, that I'm about to give you, comes directly from their developers, pretty much word for word. Let's see, virtual currencies, which we talked about, like BitNation would have with XBN. And then there's proxy currencies, which could represent physical objects, gold, things of that nature. Or think of it as kind of like virtual tokens, more or less. Financial instruments, stock markets, etc. Insurance, like the ones aforementioned for BitNation, and gambling, lotteries, whatever else. Registrars, like land registry. And also, of course, things like what NAMECOIN would do, but anyway, to get away from ICANN, that's not a terrible idea. Reputation systems, which is another word for identity, ID systems. Trust systems, kind of like VeriSign, not a bad thing. Let's see, document revision control. I'm guessing this means something along the lines, perhaps, of a degree of IP, a voluntary IP, which I'm not necessarily opposed to that, as long as it's voluntary. And then ownership, kind of like marriage. Whoa, sorry. I think my notes got that wrong. But yeah, deeds and ownership. Let's see. All the same stuff, really. If you break it down, if you compare the two, it would just be different names. Even the individual security and peer-to-peer protection that we mentioned for BitNation has been theorized by Ethereum developers because there was, and granted, this was being an extreme case, but then I'm also talking in extreme cases to some degree here, by the Ethereum developers talking about drones could be controlled by Ethereum. And so, and then of course we have assassination markets, because it makes you wonder, like, what is this peer-to-peer protection that they're talking about? I can't even imagine how that would get worked out. Would it have to? I would only imagine drones could do it, or like I said, the assassination market. But then I guess if we ask the question that Commodus asked to his father, did I miss the battle? No, it looks like you created another war. Now, we can explore each of these stated offerings individually, and that's what I want to do. Virtual currencies or cryptocurrencies, I really don't have any problem with that one, or we wouldn't be here, right? Bitcoin didn't miss the battle. It actually won the whole war, quite frankly. I love Bitcoin. Now, I wouldn't begin to say that Bitcoin is perfect, of course. It has some serious issues that have not been addressed as far as I've seen. But like I said, this talks about Bitcoin 2.0, and if you really want to know about what I think about Bitcoin, and perhaps some of its issues, maybe we'll have time for a Q&A after we can get to that. So going on the list, we have proxy currencies, which on the other hand could be a concern because I imagine it would be easy to fake physical holdings, but I could be wrong about that. That's not really a big one on my list. But financial instruments, this one's interesting because if you really think about it, the finance game is actually a sign of lack of innovation and invention in a society. Because really it's only of interest when there is nothing new to build or engineer, but you still need to find a way to increase overall wealth. Not a lot of people think about that, about the finance system in that way, but I think it's true. A lot of other people think it's true. I don't know if anyone's read Peter Thiel's recent book, but he mentions this. So, and really to illustrate the point, you have the infamous robber barons, Carnegie and the like from the late 19th and early 20th century. They did not make their wealth by playing the stock market or going for derivatives. They increased wealth for all the world by means of invention and production. I mean, and some would argue that these are still, the families of these people are still some of the wealthiest on the planet today. I mean, that's real wealth creation. So no, the finance game is just that. It's a game. Somehow integrating a system, in my opinion, that represents a lack of innovation and invention into an incredibly innovative field like Bitcoin 2.0 seems awfully backwards to me. Maybe it's so friends and big money, like Goldman Sachs, will find these things attractive. Because, we all know that Goldman Sachs is interested in creating systems that help people, right? So, did they miss the battle when it comes to financial systems? Financial instruments, I should say. No, I think they might have missed the war. Insurance, yeah. I know there's lots of people, particularly maybe in this crowd or in people that may listen to this later on, that are just jonesing over the idea of insurance being provided. Because this is kind of now I'm an anarchist. I don't really put a label at the end of that, but you have groups called anarcho-capitalists. They're really big about this whole thing with insurance companies. It's like, yes, we'll get rid of governments and we'll put insurance companies in their place, and the insurance companies will protect everything that we have and do. That way we don't need the governments and we can still have security in our possessions, etc. But honestly, at the end of that, those things, which again, some people are wanting, like BitNation. In fact, BitNation, the creator of BitNation in particular, came out and said that she is a voluntarist, which can mean anarcho-capitalist generally. Really, if you're offering these insurance companies, instead of governments duking it out, you're just going to end up having insurance companies duking that out. And honestly, that sounds kind of like warfare, but well, never mind. You don't want to think too long on that one. Did they miss the battle? The battle? No, I think they created another war again. But anyway, gaming or gambling and lotteries, I think those are cool. Registrars, with registrars, believe me, I think the DNS system is terrible. That power needs to get away from ICANN. This is one of the things I really mentioned. Like I mentioned, NAMECOIN. NAMECOIN is an awesome technology. And really what NAMECOIN does, it allows you to create that separate DNS system where you can go to .bits instead of worrying about whatever powers that be, they, them, those, taking down your .com or .net site or whichever. People can still get to the phone book of the internet, which is what the DNS system really is. I think that's fantastic, and all of these 2.0 technologies have that built in, every single one of them, and it's not a bad idea by any stretch. But beyond that, let's mix this one, the registrar idea, let's mix this in with deeds and ownership, which I think marriage is a great example of ownership. It's my notes. I'm sorry. Freudian slips, Anyway. Now look, I don't want to get into a discussion about the nature of property, but I want to tell you a little story that I personally plagiarized and butchered. So maybe I don't want that IP, but anyway, a man buys a plot of land. This is the future. This is the future that people want with Bitcoin 2.0 technology, where Ether rules the day, BitNation rules the day, BitShares rules the day, whatever. So a man buys some land with some ether or whatever other cryptocurrency or share that he has, and confirms it on the blockchain that he holds the deed and has ownership of the land. He's, everything's on the up and up. So he goes to visit his land, and as he's traversing the many acres that he has, he's probably deciding, okay, where do I want to place my new home that I'm going to end up buying with that ether too? And the farmer, I gave it away. The landowner runs into a farmer that's essentially been squatting on this land. And again, that's what he notices. What's the deal here? And the farmer is a she, and yes, a farmer can be a she, and honestly, I think overalls are pretty sexy on a woman. It's also, when you both want to have some consensual fun, it comes off very easily. She's lived there for years and has been working on the soil for just as long. And she has a little shanty off to the side that she stays in. And now, obviously, the newly deemed landowner is just freaking out about this. I can't believe, how is this person here? This is terrible. Nobody told me about this. This wasn't on the blockchain. So the man pulls out his tablet or whatever smart device he happens to have, and he brings up the BitNation app or the BitShares app or the Ethereum app. You take your pick of the Bitcoin 2.0 technology. And says to her, you see this app? You see what this says? This land is mine. I have a confirmed contract on the blockchain. This is mine. And that means you have to leave. Now, obviously, the farmer, she's a bit put out about it, and she kind of discusses the idea of homesteading with him a little bit, saying, hey, I've been here working all this. It's like, can you just really ruin all my work like that? And he shows the app again and says, look, it has 10 whole confirmations. 10 of them. This is my land. So the woman farmer, she really doesn't care to have a fight about it. And she doesn't have any XBN or Ether or BTSX or whatever to purchase any arbitration services, so she just ends up leaving. But as she walks away, she's honestly being pretty nice about it. She says, look, I've been fending off some pretty crazy wild beasts around here for years. So, just watch out for that. But the guy just won't hear it. He just leave. And then he gets 12 confirmations. Like, look, 12 confirmations, get out of here. And as she walks away, she suddenly starts hearing the man scream. And she hears bears, or something that sounds like a bear. And the guy's yelling for help. And she just kind of shrugs because she knows he never listened to her before, but anyway, still says, show him your blockchain. These things don't seem to mean much if everybody doesn't agree to them, do they?
Sounds like a story about the government, I heard.
Yeah, I totally plagiarized that. Someone recognized where it's from. Anyway, so at that point, though, because if not everybody accepts the system, what does it end up becoming? I think it ends up becoming like the age-old adage of democracy, which is it's two wolves and a sheep deciding who's for dinner. And while we're talking about democracy, let's talk about that voting, shall we? Now, on an incredibly smaller scale, and granted, when they say voting, it's a very abstract idea, but I've certainly heard plenty of people, if you're on the Bitcoin Talk forums and et cetera, not that I recommend going to Bitcoin Talk forums or Reddit, they are positively toxic forums, quite frankly. But they've talked about having it used for voting for some kind of maybe even democratic government or whichever. And I'm open to the idea that democracy or direct democracy might work on a really small scale. But honestly, when you get into the voting systems that don't even necessarily have to do with government, no, just don't talk to BitShares about this because delegated proof of stake, which is their system, is having a bit of trouble because it's based upon the idea that you vote for delegates that decide what transactions going to happen, etc. But nobody's voting. So even when you have that power, even when you have that voting, people just seem to not really care about it. And that's fine, because personally myself, I think voting is nonsense any way, shape, or form. But hey, like I said, I can see how some would want voting and its functions. However, here's my concern. When voting is tied into a quadruple verified, hyper-provable identity system, pick your adjectives for how they describe how secure these identity systems are. Because either way, you know online identity theft has never been an issue, not once. But we'll talk about that identity system more in a minute. You lose the most powerful and important aspect of any kind of voting process, in my opinion, when you put it on the blockchain. Anyone want to guess what that is? Anonymous? Someone said anonymous? Right. The secret ballot. You lose that. Why do you lose that? Because really, true anonymity of choice, which is what the secret ballot is all about, in a democratic system, and if you believe in a democracy, be it direct democracy or whatever, this is the very heart of it. And the fact that a person can vote without repercussions or shame, and it doesn't have to be voting for a person, it could be voting for things, it doesn't matter. There will never be, like I said, with the anonymity, as long as there is a blockchain, I don't believe, and most don't want to admit to this, that there will ever be actual anonymity. Because regardless if you're using stealth wallets or Titan from BitShares, Titan is their identity kind of transaction system, or whatever you're using, as long as there's a blockchain, there is nowhere near the level of anonymity that can be had in the analog world, whether it be for voting or for transactions. As long as you have a blockchain, there is, if the blockchain is accepted, of course, an unquestionable record of whatever action is being taken. And no matter how well you hide who the person is that did it, that's what Titan is supposed to do, is to hide the two parties that are doing it, I would argue that it's only a matter of time before any encryption gets cracked. Either way, the record that it is done is still there. So as an example, let's look at good cold hard cash. Now, of course, not that I recommend necessarily cash that's backed by violence. It has no actual value whatsoever other than that. But I know, I realize it's not voting, but let's look at it. So I could hand somebody $5, like I could walk up to Stephanie Murphy here, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy. And I could hand her $5, or I could hand her $1,000, as long as these cameras aren't recording anything. Who'd know? Who'd be the wiser to know that that happened? On the blockchain, eventually, down the line at some point, or right now, you know that transaction happened. And it really doesn't matter, I know somebody's going to say, well, hey, the greenbacks, they've been putting, serial numbers on them and all this stuff so they can track this. No, believe me, it's nowhere near that anonymity level is as good as perhaps the world could ever get to as far as that goes. So, voting, missing the secret ballot, I consider that an extreme loss and in no way a superior system. And speaking of cash too, boy, Bitcoin is taking quite a dive right now, isn't it? In fact, it's kind of strange. Speaking of cash, it's ironic that if you're going long on cash, you're actually winning right now. Pretty much every other market is down. I don't know what to make of that, and I really don't have a point to make with it. So let's move on. The power of voting, if it has power, I don't believe will ever really get achieved on the blockchain, true power. So, have these Bitcoin 2.0 companies missed the battle on voting? No, I think they've missed the war. But voting is a simple one to solve. There's an easy solution to this, and that's by implementing 100% consensus in everything that is to be decided upon. If it doesn't have that consensus, it doesn't happen. Sure, the system gets stuck, but so what? Everybody's more or less, getting their way at the end of it. So, but consensus does have an issue in itself, and that is it generally only works on an extremely localized level. Now, whether that's a problem is up to you, but it only works on very small sample groups. But we can get to solutions about this stuff later. Let's get back to the problems. Let's talk about that incredible ID system that is really one of the core factors of a lot of these, that ID that kind of mixes in reputation with it. Because, there's really, this is an ID system that will tell when you are communicating with another actor or with a merchant or something like that. It will say who you are. And let's face it, there's nothing more pride-inducing in life than being able to hand over your papers when someone says, papers, please, papers. And that's what ID is, right? So how's this going to work? Well, perhaps a hint exists with BitShares. and their one-time idea of Quixote, which, as far as I understand it now, is built into Titan. So it hasn't really gone away. And I had this explained to me personally because I really wanted to get my head wrapped around this by the head developer. And the identity will apparently work something like this. You want to interact with somebody, say this is a meet space. So, you want to do a transaction or something, whatever that may be. Maybe you're buying a motorcycle from them, or you are, just changing hands of whatever money of the day happens to be. So you'll pull out your smartphone, you'll punch up a blockchain identity app for whatever company this happens to be. It doesn't have to be BitShares. And you'll look at each other's apps, or maybe just, NFC or iBeacon or whatever happens to be the high tech of the day will connect with it. And then you'll end up with like a list. I wish I had some kind of example to show you, but you'll end up with a list that will quickly verify what laws and agreements you both abide by. So there could be a selection of, okay, this person, think of anything that you would want to have a shared interest that gives you a degree of trust with dealing with another person. But anyway, it will not only bring up that information, but it will also bring up things like perhaps credit history, a reputation, much like eBay, where it says, hey, this guy is a trusted seller, or something like Facebook, where you can see, how many friends does she have, and does she have a girlfriend? Yeah, that's okay. Now, of course, you'll be able to choose what information you'd like to share, at least I hope you'll have that option. But then keep in mind that many people's interaction level rises and falls, or the degree to which they want to interact with you will rise and fall based upon how much they know about you, and honestly, the more the better. So you can say, well, I can voluntarily share just so much, but then is that going to get you to your end game? And that problem is one we're running into right now without Bitcoin 2.0, actually. Well, now, what I want to get into is, let me skip up. Okay. The point there is that even with trustless systems, which that's the whole point of this, even with trustless systems, there's still a degree of trust, because if you only have so much information, even within a trustless system, it is up to the person at the end of the day to want to interact with you, based upon their own levels of trust. So trust really doesn't leave the equation, as much as we like to think that it doesn't when it comes to that one-on-one interaction, or maybe even more online. And again, this brings us to a really huge problem that we have overall, and it's a problem that exists largely outside of Bitcoin 2.0. In fact, it has nothing to do with it, because it's a problem with reputation systems in general. And again, let's face it, by its very definition, reputation is a major part of identity. And for example, let's see. We already have, with the internet, you don't have perfect anonymity by any means, and you certainly don't have the anonymity that Bitcoin 2.0 could provide unless you're going through various services like Tor or I2P or something. But you do have reputation systems, and even within those reputation systems, since the way people treat these things, you can more or less be pretty much anonymous if you wanted to, say, give something a rating, which is the point of reputation, is rating. So let's take Yelp, for instance, or take Facebook, for instance. I wouldn't use eBay in this discussion. Again, we're talking about reputation systems that already exist before Bitcoin 2.0 implements any of it. And yeah, I wouldn't use eBay as an example because their reputation system is so screwed up that they eventually had to make it so that only the buyer could leave feedback. Feedback, read that as reputation. And the seller was, by the rules, by the code, or, in other words, was not allowed to leave feedback about the buyer. It's a one-way digital street that has ravaged what eBay was all about in the first place, which is giving you that nice local garage sale feel in the digital realm. But let's get back to Yelp. So that's why we're not going to put eBay in this. But let's get back to Yelp. Anyone use Yelp here? How was your experience? Good? So-so. Well, we got a good. Okay, so-so. Come on, how many people was it bad for you? Nobody. Yeah, okay, there, thank you. I love you. So, you're probably saying, let's see, what we had with Yelp, we all know what Yelp is though, right? I suppose that's what I should have asked first. Okay, Yelp is an idea to where you can rate restaurants or whichever, and you're supposed to get it's a good third-party rating, so you don't have to rely upon the idea possibly that the restaurant would say, we're a 5-star restaurant, and you walk in there and it looks like a dung heap. That's the idea. So, well, there's a great story, CNET posted a little while back, about a restaurant in California that wanted to get the worst possible ratings it could on Yelp. What the hell's wrong with these people? They want to get the worst possible ratings on Yelp. What was the idea? In fact, they didn't just want it, they wanted it really bad because they would give you a discount if you went into the restaurant and you ordered it, and if they'd ask you, they'd say, will you please give us the worst possible rating on Yelp? And yeah, you got a cheaper meal out of that. So why would they want bad reviews on something that is supposed to send a ton of business your way? And that's what Yelp is all about. It's supposed to help people get business to you, and it's supposed to help the consumer feel better that you're on the up and up. Well, it's because they know, like some here have discovered, even if you said so, that Yelp kind of sucks at what it does. Yelp can be gamed by the very story I just told you. It proves that Yelp can be gamed. These star ratings can be with a kind of a degree of anonymity, perhaps with the reputation version of what maybe you want to compare it to a denial of service attack. They can be BS'd from end to end. In fact, that restaurant wanting bad ratings was proving it could be done, like I said. And not even that, let's say there is a competition in the field of reputation listings for services like restaurants, because guess what, there are. Google offers this as well, so perhaps you'll go and get a second opinion on it. But then what's another story we've heard about recently? Google favors its own results, and Yelp claims Google is doing all they can to keep you from even seeing Yelp's rankings. How are you possibly going to get anything remotely like consensus with these kinds of services? They're gaming each other, even when there's competition. The competition isn't giving you a better service. It's one trying to wipe out the other. They're not even concerned about you. Or how about Facebook and Twitter? You go to see if you should follow or friend this person, and so you rightly or wrongly base your decision on how many followers or friends they have. How many people here do that? Come on. You take somebody way more seriously if they have 20,000 followers on Twitter. I think that goes without saying. But I said it. So, you check that out, how many followers or friends they have again, but then we know all too well that many of these people, often the ones with 20,000 or even higher, can just easily hire services that can give them, for a fee of course, high follow counts or hits or friends or whatever, all right, let's just go right to Amazon. So the point is that Facebook and Twitter can be gamed, so let's go right to Amazon. And Amazon, of course, is the company that everybody wants to ignore, because really, in many ways, they're very much taking over the world. But every single entrepreneur that deals on Amazon knows one fact. Pay no attention to the 5-star ratings and the 1-star ratings. Pay attention to the 3-star ratings. Why? Because the 5-star ratings are coming from usually a friend, or, again, another service that they could hire to make them look good. Say it's an author, or you're offering some kind of product. Or you have the 1-star rating, which could very much be, the competition. This guy is like people that don't like the author. You can't trust it. And most people don't even bother. They don't care. They do not care whether or not, because what Amazon did, this was such a problem that Amazon had, that they put in this little line that says verified purchase. Okay, but that verified purchase, nobody looks at that because it doesn't show at the top next to the picture of the product that you're looking at, and they just want to see how many stars it has. They don't care, but that's the thing, is every reputation system we know right now can be completely gamed. It is absolutely proven that it can be gamed, and you don't even have to crack the code of the reputation system to do this. Okay, but then let's talk about cracking the code, and let's talk about identity even beyond just reputation systems. If your entire proof of identity and claim to various wallets or accounts or services, again, all of these that Ethereum and BitNation want to provide, is based on a system of code, You going to trust that? There's an old saying that the most determined hacker is a 12-year-old with a laptop. And do you think that 12-year-old cares about what happens to, somebody in Botswana? Or, somebody across the street? Most likely not. He's just having a good time. And, hey, whatever. I mean, think about this. Think about the fact that you are how much you're putting on there, how much you're attaching your identity. And this is the point. You are attaching your identity. There's people getting married here. They're putting their marriage, which some people would say is the most sacred institution on planet Earth. They are putting it on the blockchain, and you want to trust that. And then you listen to 2 weeks ago, you have Bashbug. Who knows what Bashbug is? Okay, yeah, Bashbug. This is terrifying. Steve Gibson, from Security Now, a great security analyst, he says, this isn't a back door into the internet, this is a front door into every server out there. And you want to put your entire identity onto that? But this is what Bitcoin 2.0 companies want. But it's a central point of failure. And honestly, I think it could ruin your life in a heartbeat, depending on how big these companies get and how much sway they hold in our lives. One of the greatest challenges we're facing today is getting governing bodies and even corporate bodies, but I repeat myself, to not gauge our online actions based upon our IP address. Why? Because they're just addresses, they're not humans. And I would venture that public keys should, at the end of the day, be considered no different. It's an address created by someone at some point, but it's not a human, which brings me to another point. People change. Remember these ID systems like Titan that we talked about, and others based upon what rules you accept? And what if going to a porn site causes a decrease in reputation or is a breaking of the rules? What if one of your check boxes, like I mentioned, of am I willing to deal with you, is a symbol of a fish? And this is very popular in businesses for Christians. It's how they know that, okay, this person's a Christian, I'll deal with them. And that's fine. I mean, it's an interesting way of doing things. But then suddenly the blockchain registers that you've invested in a DAC that offers the best Asian ass porn on the planet. Oh, you didn't actually invest in that? You say your account got cracked? Likely story, buddy. Computers never lie. Or perhaps you're lying that you're a good Bible-believing Christian when you're not, in which case, if the identity system didn't record that you're into porn, so if it didn't record that, then your reputation's useless. If you have that fish symbol on, it doesn't mean anything. People are too easily controlled by shame and fear of repercussions, be it by government or society. And if a Bitcoin 2.0 ID system enforces either on others, have they missed the battle? No, really, they missed the war. So what do we have left on the list? Trust systems, document version control. I think you can wrap those up with a lot of thoughts on reputation and ID. I don't think people find these to be the most exciting. Of course, DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations. I think setting up DAOs or DACs is a pretty interesting way to automate business, among other things. And really, their use comes down to what level of human touch a person wants in their business. Of course, there's also the way these things raise capital, these companies. Honestly, I think it's insanity that some of these companies can't even tell you how these ideas are going to work. And believe me, go watch the interviews with these people. They don't know, they can't describe their own products. Or they can't even tell you, let's take Ethereum, what proof are we going to use? Proof of stake? Proof of work? Anybody know? Nope, I don't either. But they have $15 million. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. Yeah. Let's see, or in the case of BitNation, we have a crowd sale starting in a few days, I believe. And you need to, really, all you got to do is just go to a search engine, type in, Kickstarter complaints, and you're going to see just how of a bad idea a lot of these crowdfunding things are. So, not a fan of how all this stuff is getting funded. But is this the end of the story? Well, in the spirit of Steve Jobs, one more thing. We've talked about blockchain technology, how it's being planned by these Bitcoin 2.0 companies to invade almost every part of your life, from cradle to grave in some cases, birth certificates, death certificates. But there's one place we didn't discuss, and that's the most private of places, that being your home. And this is where IBM's Adept comes in. Adept, as I mentioned before, is a blockchain BitTorrent hybrid technology that wants to be at the heart of the Internet of Things. Everybody knows what the Internet of Things is? Okay, this is good, and I don't really have to describe it that much. One of the first examples of IoT, which means Internet of Things, as it's called, was a refrigerator from GE and a company called Quirk. And what this did was it showed you how many eggs you have left in the refrigerator on an app on your smartphone. Because, the worst problem that you could possibly have and that you need to spend $5,000, $6,000, $10,000, $12,000 on is when you're at the grocery store, gee, am I out of eggs? If you have to spend $12,000 on that problem, you are the problem. I mean, that's insane. Spend $3. Eggs don't even need to be refrigerated. That's an American nonsense idea. And just get more eggs. And if you waste them, it's better than wasting $3 than $12,000. So anyway, IBM's ADAPT is trying to solve two problems with IoT. One is, of course, cloud storage of information. Home appliances are designed to last for decades, and people will most likely not even let the nascent IoT market get off the ground if they have to pay for cloud storage of the metadata and data coming from their appliances. So blockchain, BitTorrent tech can help assuage the scalability issues of that. I mean, you're not going to pay for Google Drive for the next year, for the next 30 years on your device just because it needs that to be able to, do all the efficiency things that it wants to do. But the second problem is to solve security, and this is the more interesting one. This is a serious issue. I agree with it. Even if your Nest thermostat doesn't store banking information on it, it is a gateway to your home router, which would give access to all kinds of information, including that information. So I appreciate that IBM is being really proactive about IoT, and its security before we end up with NFC chips in our light bulbs and doorknobs, both of which they've given as examples of what would be chipped if everything goes to plan. Because, hey, while certainly the average door is not good security and can be easily kicked in, a door lock controlled by NFC is really always open just a crack. Anybody get that one? Open just a crack? Crack it? Yeah, okay. But let's consider this. First, I'm impressed at how quickly IBM really grasped what they could do with the blockchain technology, and that's a clever implementation, no doubt. It does make me wonder if they're not working with some other Bitcoin 2.0 company, but that's regardless. I don't even want to get into that. And it is open source, and with that, I imagine it would be easy for a smart home to connect to other blockchain clients, as this is blockchain technology. They could kind of all work the same. Some people are trying to do that. An NXT wallet can work with Doge, or you have merged mining, all these kinds of things. I could totally see ADAPT being, because IBM's not really laying claim to it, I could see ADAPT being used by Ethereum or BitNation, or take your pick. And again, though, just like with the ID, this is a central point of failure. And it accesses everything about you, especially if you're tossing your ID on there, and everything that's going on in your home. So, and you can say that, well, you don't have to buy the Internet of Things. You don't have to buy that $12,000 refrigerator. But in that case, I do ask you to go to Home Depot. I am in need of incandescent light bulbs. You're not going to get your hands on them. They're illegal. Okay, so even you're going to have to bring me a CFL. And I hate CFLs. Make me tired. So how long is it before IoT becomes the only legal game in town? Or when is it the central point of failure that gets forced upon you by the market, or perhaps even the blockchain? Your home, your finances, your identity, your land, we talked about that, your marriage, your life, all wrapped up in something protected by private keys that every day the clock is ticking on for when the encryption is going to finally get cracked. Well, we'll implement better technology, or better encryption, they say. But after how long? How many lives ruined by then? Will they do a rollback, perhaps? Oh, how about that one? At any given time, the developers of these technologies could just do a rollback. And think about that one. Think about everything you'd put on these blockchains, and then there would be that rollback. Years of investments, or interactions, or your marriage, or whatever, could all just not have happened. Now, of course, people will say you have to choose to accept the new version of the rolled back blockchain, but then we run into that two wolves and a sheep thing again at that point, unless there's consensus. What if the majority decides that your information wasn't important? You'd have to do a hard fork, but who's going to develop that forked blockchain? You? I wonder. And this really dovetails nicely into the first criticism that anyone is going to level at what I'm saying here, and it is, hey, this is all voluntary. And you're right, it is. But so is U.S. citizenship. And have any of you tried to leave the U.S., let alone try to stop being a citizen? Anyone of means? Anyone? No? Okay.
You have to be of means.
Yeah, you'd have to be of means.
Yeah.
I mean, there is an exit tax. Bitcoin is very much about wealth protection. Fortunately, it can do that because the dinosaur-like governments of our day don't appear to really understand it. But what about when your personal wealth, whatever that may be, is tied in with people that do understand it? What happens when you try to leave the BitNation or Ethereum system then? Can you just walk away? Or will you have to pay an exit tax? Maybe you think these are just digital and you can escape doing business with them like you can escape the internet in most countries. No, you can't. And let's just keep in mind that these things are not just digital. If they were, they should hold no bearing on your property ownership. If they are just digital, the BitNation and the like would not be saying they are competing with governments. I would present to you the idea that in the 1780s, when the United States of America was very young, it thought it needed different governance too. It wanted a constitution away from the Articles of Confederation. And clearly, the people at the Constitutional Convention, look around you folks, did not think things through. How great is the Constitution if you live in Iraq? Ferguson. Yeah, how's Ferguson? Right,
Yeah,
great point.
exactly.
How's that Constitution working in Ferguson? Clearly, the Constitutional Convention did not do their homework.
Or they did.
Yeah, or they did. Well, and that brings me to my point. Like Lysander Spooner said, but whether the Constitution really be one thing or another, this much is certain. That it has either authorized such a government as we have had, or it has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. And let me tell you, after having years in the military, I can assure you that the things this government has authorized does make it unfit to exist. And if you're thinking another or more government, think the blockchain, Bitcoin 2.0 technologies we're talking about, you are really, in my opinion, you are like an alcoholic thinking that you can solve your problem by drinking more whiskey. Has Bitcoin 2.0 missed the battle? No. They missed the war. All these technologies, I think, are really trying to solve some problems. I really do. I think there's some very good-hearted people in there. I'm not calling them evil. I'm talking about the possibilities of where this can go, long after maybe some of them are even dead. I think they have asked themselves the quintessential startup question, what problem does it solve? But I think it's clear that they have yet to think things through all the way. They have not considered what problem does it solve without creating a ton of other problems, like we started this. And it is important to think to extremes. The precautionary principle, while it can be used to instill fear, should always be used. It is the yellow blinking light that reminds you to look in all directions when you get to the crossroads. Rampant optimism is as debilitating and deadly as any amount of fear, and this community has far too much optimism. You must always consider the options. You must always say to yourself, like when the late Steve Jobs and his wife went to buy a sofa, okay, let's think about this. What is the purpose of a sofa, and why do we need one in the first place? The solution to our global problems is not to replace governments with other governance. It's to get rid of them entirely and work on ourselves and work on a community level, relocalization. The Earth may be our only true country because all that other stuff is just lines drawn on a map. So it may be our only country, but it is not our village. We have to consider what makes meat space so healthy. It is the redundancy provided by biodiversity. Nature knows nothing of a one ring to rule them all or one code to rule them all. Biodiversity of ecosystems ensures that when something goes wrong in one system, it doesn't take the whole planet with it. It ensures that there is a cooperation between systems that allows each one to grow separately and share in the fruits of each ecosystem at the same time. When you consider the Dunbar number, which scientifically shows that we as humans can only have meaningful relationships between 50 to 150 people at a time, humans can only handle so much, only so many relationships, which are the very essence of life. You listen to how people hate Facebook, and I do too. I hate Facebook. One day I will delete that account. Or whatever social network. It doesn't have to be Facebook. people, and they say, like, I'm looking for that front porch that America used to have, or that whatever country you happen to be in used to have. They're looking for real human connection. That's what they keep saying. And I think you're seeing people realize that this global connection in commerce is not satisfying them like real human touch does. All of this digital interconnectedness in code is trying to give us back the natural intuition we have when we're face to face. And really, that can often tell us all we need to know about another person that we're dealing with. And all this technology is just trying to take that intuition and put it to a global level in our global society. But it's not working, and I don't think it can ever work. It's like you're trying to have sex via Skype. You know it pales in comparison. You know it. There are some things that just get lost in translation, some things that just don't code. Technology is a means to an end, not an end unto itself, and it can work and can be a powerful tool for personal freedom. But like any tool, it should only be meant to enhance and enrich our analog lives and relationships, not consume them and control them and pack our interactions neatly into little code, or be hampered by laws and rules that not everyone agrees upon. Like Julian Assange recently said, no one understood nuclear weapons either at first. But like the internet, they shaped geopolitics. I think the same could be applied, as is willfully being applied to much of Bitcoin 2.0, the shaping of geopolitics. And listen to these developers, they talk this way. Because really all the complexity in these Bitcoin 2.0 projects that I've talked about are designed at the end of the day to do one thing: fight and perhaps even control human nature. It is assuming that your way of life, that being the developers or whoever is supporting it, and your values are the only way, and that some lines of code will force those mores upon others. This is the tyranny of the code, and many people, sadly, I think, are begging for it. So, like the Emperor's son Commodus, the Bitcoin 2.0 companies go riding up to the sovereign individual, and they ask, did I miss the battle? And like his father, Marcus Aurelius, we as individuals should turn and say, no, you missed the war. Thank you. I don't know that we have time for questions, but okay. My name's Brian.
I got a quick point for you. You talked about reputation. I love the point where you say that people change. And that's one of the fundamental flaws of hard reputation systems and hard identity systems, because they assume that identity is an eternal fact, and that neither the identity, nor your values, nor your reputation, nor your actions change over time. So I'd just like to point out that BitShares named their reputation system Quixote. And Quixote is the story of a Spanish nobleman who had a stellar reputation until he suffered a psychotic break and went on a megalomaniacal, paranoid, delusional rampage through the Spanish countryside that ended in a suicidal attack against the windmill.
He was taking on windmills, yeah.
Yes, but up to the point where he suffered that psychotic break, he had a wonderful reputation. So maybe BitShares are trying to tell us something through the choice of that name, because it really shows how pointless it is to put faith in reputation.
I certainly hope so. I think that's a great point to make. And again, I do hope. But with the other systems that at least I give Dan Larimer a lot of credit for, at least giving his notions of how that's going to happen, as to where the others really haven't answered it at all, but then people are just constantly giving them tons and tons of money. Anyone else?
So, there we go. 1, 2. So you're essentially warning us that putting too much faith in technology can be dangerous, right? So as individuals or sovereignty.
That's an abstract there, yeah.
But you still have your Facebook account. But you're telling us, hey, before you put all your eggs in this Bitcoin 2.0, understand that there might be consequence, the precautionary principle and all that. How do you square that away? Because my point, if I have a point in this question, it would be, You cannot stop the technology. It's going to keep on moving. The question is, how are we going to use it? And warning, I appreciate the conversation here. I might not be as cautious as you are, but the warning is important, and we need these discussions. But regardless of however we talk, the technology will keep on progressing, and there's nothing we can do about it.
You're absolutely right. You're 100% right that the technology does keep progressing, but that also illustrates the problems that humans are not. Humans are not growing. We're spending too much time progressing the technology instead of looking inside. And I think, honestly, there's a great quote by Leo Laporte where he says that we're looking at these smartphone screens and these screens all the time just to keep us from remembering that we're going to die. And I think that's so true.
Louis C.K. said that too.
Yeah, Louis C.K. said, yeah, absolutely. It's true. I think a lot of this technology is to just ignore doing, just like voting in general, in my opinion. I think it's the same thing. People do it because it makes them think like they're doing something. It makes them feel like they're doing something, that they're changing the world somehow. And really the only way you can change the world is by working on yourself. But that is incredibly terrifying, far more terrifying than any guns or any technology. So, and that's really the point of what I'm trying to make here, is that we need that human touch. We need that interaction. And I'm also making the point that I think these technologies should be relocalized, taking a good hard look at the Dunbar number. There's nothing wrong with Facebook in principle, but there is something wrong when you are replacing Facebook and how can you interact with 5,000 people, I think is the max of friends that you can have? How can you possibly have a good conversation with 5,000 people? That's impossible. I mean, we're talking at each other instead of to each other. Technology is, again, like Julian Assange said, nobody understood what nuclear weapons were doing either. And I don't think we have a good grasp of what the internet is doing and perhaps what these Bitcoin 2.0 technologies can do. Any other questions?
One question. This may be a minor technical point, but you were talking about voting systems on the blockchain and how you would lose secret ballot if you had identity associated with voters. And I mean, it seems to me there's technical solutions to that using bind signatures and so forth. So, but your concern is that someday the crypto will be broken, and so things will.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's not really that anonymous. I agree, there are solutions. In fact, like I said, 100% consensus could solve the whole problem. But consensus has its own issues in that it generally only actually gets you anywhere with a small group of people. But then that's my point, is that this stuff needs to be relocalized. Even Bitcoin, like a catch-all currency doesn't really work. I know a lot of people think that, well, we just need that one currency. No, you want a bunch of different currencies. I mean, because Bitcoin has a lot of problems. It cannot address the issues, and people have gone to Africa to try and solve them. It cannot address the issues that are happening in Africa. You would need to program something completely different. It'd have to be something, in my opinion, and I'm not that great of a programmer, but it'd have to be something that did not require to be persistently online. And because it's not, the online interconnected world is not happening anytime soon, and everybody knows this, including Google and others, Facebook, you name it. That's why if you notice all your apps that have updated now all have offline functionality, because they know it's just too cost prohibitive, even if they want to launch balloons or drones, to really get this world interconnected, and we need to look at that. That's one of the issues with Bitcoin that I have. Another question.
Well, I think you're criticizing Ethereum as though it's a centralized organization, but really isn't Ethereum, the whole idea of just building a platform that any group could build any sort of contract to any group, and as long as there's hundreds of different groups, each of them you have to join, you can join voluntarily, but you don't have to join them.
Yeah,
and then it still can be very decentralized, so it seems to me it's creating a decentralization of power, and so there is an advantage over the current systems like a government.
Sure, it's a fair point. The word decentralized, everybody has a different definition of that. I wouldn't necessarily say that Ethereum is essentially decentralized. It runs into the same problem of part of what I was critiquing in this is the blockchain itself. Blockchains are in themselves a central point of failure, thus they are not actually decentralized. But with Ethereum, I have a saying that I use that I've used my whole life. I don't follow the money, I follow the attitude. And that means I do look into what exactly do developers have in mind, how do they talk. And I think it's not unfair, and I'm open to being corrected, and I'm open to being wrong about everything. I like being wrong. I'm actually a very optimistic guy, but the way I talk sounds very pessimistic. And so I often hope that the words that come out of my mouth end up being dead wrong all the time. But with the Ethereum developers, and I don't just mean to pick on Ethereum, this really goes for just about any of the 2.0 technologies, they definitely have the idea that they want to be the one ring that rules them all. And again, like they said, well, it's voluntary, but I don't know, no one's discussed the cost of leaving these things. What happens when you don't want to deal in them anymore? And we're not just talking about money. With Bitcoin, it's just money. You can leave and you can walk away and it's fine. But they're talking about reputation, ID systems, financial instruments, your marriage again. I hate to keep bringing that one up, but maybe I'm just trying to get it to sink into everybody's head that it might be a bad idea in general. But anyway, so that's my thoughts on that. Anyone else?
I got one too.
One more. All right, we got one
so
more.
As a 2.0 developer, I've been doing a lot of research and thought around identity and reputation, and I take what you say to heart very dearly.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so one of the things that I've been looking at is doing a reputation system that leverages the web of trust, such that someone could say whatever they want about you, but if they're not within 1 or 2 or 3 degrees of your web of trust, you can just not care. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, the web of trust that was promised by PGP, for instance.
Sure. And that's a great example, and I love your shirt, by the way. Space Invaders, it's awesome. That's a great point, and I think that is PGP, comparing it to PGP is a great idea, but then what does PGP require to really work? Key parties, okay? And that's my point.
Why are we not having one?
Right, I agree. What's my room number? Yeah, it has to be easy. You're right. But at the core, it has to be something. Your web of trust requires actual face-to-face contact and trust, and that's the point that I'm getting to. Is that we have to, these technologies, this idea of global commerce and global this and that, which is very much in mind what a lot of these 2.0 companies have, is a failure on its face, in my opinion. I think the globalization of everything that happened long before the internet, even before blockchain technology was even thought of, is a real issue because people are losing a lot of those those instincts that they can automatically have, that bad feeling that we can't really quantify, but it's just as important as any form of encryption, in my opinion. So I think you're right, we could do that, but then that makes the point, in my opinion, that we have to get back to where it's smaller groups, it's localized, there's not one big system that everybody attributes to. So that's it, thank you so much. Please go to, if you want to hear more of this kind of crazy talk, this absolute nonsense, go to sovryn.tech.com. It's sovereigntech.com, and I've been Brian Sovryn. Thank you.
Yay, woo! Yay, Stallion! No. Okay, so that was great. What am I doing to my own horn? I enjoyed doing that, even though it was at points, I tried to keep it kind of humorous, but then at the end, I suppose it was decently serious. And so I want to clear a couple things up. One of them being, as I mentioned, the precautionary principle, and actually someone who was in the audience asked a question, and I consider a good friend. He was concerned about the precautionary principle, and what this is, the precautionary principle, and actually I talked about it in episode 94 of Sovereign Tech, is, and this gets overused by some people. Okay, this gets taken. Talk about taking to extremes. This goes like, way out there. This often, honestly, it often gets used by religious, like fundamentalist, religious people. It can get used by politicians, by a whole bunch of people where they just say, look, no, this could do this, and so we should not do it. And I totally understand the reservations about that, and that's why I made sure I wanted to describe it as, when I mentioned the precautionary principle, I said it's important to discuss it, okay, but it is the yellow blinking light that you find when you get to the crossroads. It's not, that's the difference, is a lot of people will use the precautionary principle as a red light, meaning stop, and I'm saying it is the yellow blinking light that, just be cautious, look around, but you can still go through. So I wanted to make sure that was very much understood. The second point that I want to bring up overall, my vision is different, I think, from a lot of other people's, perhaps in the liberty movement in general. A lot of people are just wanting this global anarchy, I don't think that's possible. B, I don't think that it may not even be beneficial. It may not even be, what everybody expects it to be. I want relocalization. And that was really the entire context, the entire core of my talk, is that things should be relocalized. And one person who asked a question, he was actually a programmer there, said, couldn't we just use these technologies perhaps at that level? And yeah, maybe you could choose to, certainly. But then that's the point, is that, that's my point with digital biodiversity, which is biodiversity in general is a big thing for me. But my point with digital biodiversity is that, when one system fucks up, it doesn't take every other system with it. Okay. So yeah, certainly these things, even Ethereum or BitNation, whatever, could be done at local levels. But I don't, take with BitNation, are you going to have to do a fundraiser at every fucking local level? I don't even understand where, if you have this idea all laid out and everything, what do you even need a fundraiser now for? But anyway, sorry, I'm getting off topic. Somehow NXT did it with very little money, quite frankly, or did a whole bunch of stuff, not necessarily to the breadth of what BitNation's doing. And I'm still totally confused as to how exactly they're going to administer defense. And of course, I already talked about that in the talk. Anyway, enough of that. I am pretty well, other than on the show Sovryn Tech, I don't plan on doing this talk anywhere else, unless it gets specifically requested. As far as I know, I have been more or less asked to be at other Bitcoin conferences, and I'm very honored by the people to, that will be happening. But this is a topic that I'm pretty much done with here. Okay. Here's the warning. We talked about it. Okay. Maybe you have other ideas of what could go wrong. We could talk about that, or you've got the solutions. And when I hear those solutions, I'll be the first one to talk about them on Sovryn Tech. Okay. Because that's part of the reason I do the show, is to try and distill this stuff down to what it means for anarchy and personal freedom. Okay. So this is, I'll be doing other talks, but I'll probably end up, again, unless I'm requested, otherwise by, the event organizers or whoever, some people could, I imagine, persuade me. I'm pretty much done with this kind of discussion. I'd rather talk about the next topic I'd really love to do a talk about, would be, more about the fact that Bitcoin doesn't need to be mainstream ever. Or talk about how Bitcoin, should be treated literally as digital gold. And if we are to have money, then it should be more the reserve currency and have it be the backing for other currencies, have it be more or less like the greenback, but something that has actual value in the fact that we value it and it's not backed by a gun. Talking about things like that, is perhaps what I'll do more in the future. But as far as this, unless something really crazy happens, I am pretty much done giving this speech. So, and it's so many people that talk, they just give you the good old fashioned, rah, rah, liberty, yeehaw, yeah, fuck the government, rah, rah, all that stuff. And believe me, I could do that kind of talk. Maybe that's what people really want. I don't know, because everybody seems to get excited and find those kind of speakers always so inspirational. Of course, granted, I understand this talk was a bit of a downer, but I want to deliver something that people haven't heard before. That you're coming to, and Coins in the Kingdom is meant to be a celebration, so I kind of feel bad that I'm bringing kind of this downer subject there. But I wasn't anti-Bitcoin; I was totally pro-Bitcoin, in the matter. So anyway, I like to deliver something original. I've gone to a lot of these conferences, and boy, some of the people that talk at them, they're just regurgitating the same shit. And it's amazing because they'll get a packed house and people are just like, it just blows my mind. And I'm like, no, could you give me something new? Give me something, original. Give me a laid out case. And anyway, I hope that I delivered that in this case. And again, total thanks to Jason King. He is an absolute sweetheart, at Sean's Outpost who helped set this up, for giving me the carte blanche, and to MK Lords, for giving me the carte blanche to, with a good, they gave me a good hour and change, and they, pretty much said, yeah, say what you want to say, and that was really, it doesn't, that's respect from peers. And I really appreciate that. And I respect them with everything I've got. So anyway, I'll catch you on the next episode. Regular episode coming out later this week, of course. I like to keep Sovryn Tech as consistent as an atomic clock. Wonder if anybody's going to get that inside joke. Carpe Lucem, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. Please feel free to send your feedback. Sovryn Tech at riseup.net, hit message, take your pick, Twitter. There's plenty of ways to get in touch with me. And hell, tell me if I'm wrong. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.